NTV, turning on your world.
Your World, in association with Young Scientist Kenya.
On this Tuesday, is it Tuesday? Yes, it's Tuesday, the last Tuesday of the month of November. So I hope that you woke up in good spirits and ready for the day. Welcome to the show. This is Your World. My name is Winnie Lubembe. Now, research warns that nearly half of the world's population will be at severe risk of climate change impacts by 2030. And the faster the climate changes, the longer adaptation efforts are put off. Well, the more difficult and expensive it could be. So among the deliberations from COP27 was the launch of Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda, which concluded that $140 to $300 billion needs to be mobilized annually. So the question is, what exactly is the impact of climate adaptation as far as climate change is concerned? And again, who's going to hold all these nations that made promises accountable? Just to make sure that the funds are there and, of course, they are channeled in the right way. Well, that is what we want to focus on the conversation today. So make sure you stick around until the end of the conversation. But remember, like we usually say, it's very easy for us to point fingers and say, so-and-so is not doing their part, and the other person is not doing their part, the government is not doing their part. But really, what are you doing to contribute towards climate adaptation? All right, what is it that you're doing to contribute to the same? Engage with us as always on our social media platforms at NTV Kenya. That is both on Facebook and on Twitter. And please tag me at Lubembe_Winnie on Twitter. But if you want to call in live as well, contribute in whichever way, shape or form, feel free to do so. The numbers will be down on your screen in just a moment. So enough of me talking. Let me introduce my guest for the day. We have Maimuna Kabatesi. I usually call you Kabetsi. Maybe that should be like your new nickname.
No, let's stick with Kabatesi.
Kabatesi, okay, all right. Maimuna Kabatesi, Global Program Manager at HIVOS. It's so good to see you this morning. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right, and of course we also have Isaac Oindo, who's a Program Officer, Gender and Climate at YWCA. How are you doing this morning?
I'm fine, thank you.
Karibuni sana, both of you. Let's have this conversation because most of the time, first of all, just understanding adaptation and the whole concept behind adaptation. There was a lot that were discussed during, the COP27, but let's just get to understand adaptation, right? In its simplest of forms. Maimuna, let's begin with you. When we say adaptation and, of course, the impact that it has on climate change, what exactly, does that term mean?
Yeah, thank you, Winnie. I think it's actually important to remember that as much as, we talk in technical terms, some of these things are actually quite easy to understand. So if we talk about adaptation, it's literally just how do we as human beings, as the world, how do we adapt to our changing environment? So climate change is causing, I think, unprecedented changes in terms of the speed and the extremeness with which they're happening. And for a lot of us, it's important that we find ways to adapt. So for instance, if you're a smallholder farmer and your livelihood is growing, crops, but the seasons are changing, you need to be able to adapt to find maybe is it new crops for the new environment you're in or new planting times. I think we've heard so much about the different seasons and how it's affecting like pastoralists, how it's affecting farmers. It's also things about, for instance, some of the impacts when it's related to drought or to flooding. How do we as human beings, how do we as communities adapt to those instances? What are measures that we can put in place to make sure that we are protected? So that's essentially in a nutshell what adaptation is.
All right, and of course, Isaac, majority of the times when we talk about climate change, adaptation, mitigation, we sort of detach ourselves from that. It's like, yeah, that's the government's job to make sure that we're safe. That is, or, UNEP's job or any other person, just to make sure that we are okay. So we tend to detach ourselves from that. But really, when it comes to feeling the impact of climate change, what would you say we are at? I know for Africa, I mean, listen, we contribute very little, but at the same time, we are the most affected. Yeah. And just this morning, I was looking at the map, the continent that is for Africa, and it's worrying to see the rate at which the continent is drying, and it's very, very worrying. So how then do we sort of like put ourselves in the shoes just to really understand how climate change has affected all of us?
Thank you very much, Winnie. Just as Maimuna has put it, really, when it comes to adaptation, we cannot look at it as a global issue or just an issue that can be addressed by the government. But nowadays, our languages has changed. We are talking about locally led actions, okay? That as a farmer, there are things that you can do really to adapt to maybe that harsh environmental condition that may make you register maybe low harvest. If you are in another industry, like transport industry, what is it that we can do? So some of these actions cannot just be left for the governments or cannot just be left for the United Nations to address, but it is trickling down to the people. There is what you can do. Giving example, okay? You cannot keep on doing the same things the same way and expect a different result. Like a farmer, really, you cannot plant crops that will take longer period of time for you to harvest. It means you have to adapt to the changing environment, incorporate technology so that by the time you are harvesting those crops that can do well in your farm and can register bumper harvest in that case. Yes, so to me, adaptation is not a global issue. As far as it's a global issue, but the actions are specific and narrowing down to the communities. Yes.
And finding the correct information is where the biggest issue is, because I think you've had majority of the farmers saying, listen, we used to do a lot of maize, but now it's not doing so well because, of all these other reasons that they might give. So then the question is, what do we turn to? Because this is something that they have been doing for a very long time, right? And now starting to think, okay, so then how do we incorporate this and change this into that? Some have actually resulted to doing avocados, and maybe it's not doing well in that particular region. So then understanding the role of adaptation and, changing to the same, what is like the correct, is there like a correct way to do so? Because, and if so, what is that? So that we do not, adapt, but then adapt, in a way that brings more damage.
Yeah, I think what I would say is that it is important to put, as Isaac has just mentioned, local communities at the heart of adaptation. And I think that's part of the issue that we have at the moment. We are trying to, as a global community, trying to solve a very complex problem by doing one size fits all. And that's not going to work. It can't happen, Different communities have different ways of, existing, different, maybe let's say cultural staples. And I think that's the importance of having adaptation be locally led. It really cannot, as Isaac said, stay at that global stage. So all actors involved in adaptation, the financiers, the governments, all governments need to understand that it's local communities who need this information. So we need, for instance, if it's a government, to invest more in things that assist, let's say if it's farmers, like agricultural extension officers, research and development into some of the technologies, or into some of the ways in which we might plant the same things but at different times. Things like early warning systems, data, for farmers, data for communities, even just things that are actually really targeting at that very, very local level. That's the only way that adaptation will succeed. And I think that it's something that is difficult for people to, let me say, not grasp, but to accept. Because we kind of want to say, let me just channel this big amount of funding and it will work out. But actually, we have to also take the time to work with local communities and make sure that local communities are at the center of all adaptation.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a time we were having, again, more or less a similar conversation, and I think a farmer called in and said, listen, we used to do a lot of blue gums, because we didn't know the dangers that it has until our rivers started drying out. Yeah. And then, we stopped and, we sort of like morphed into something else. Yeah. And now, we're seeing a bit of change. Yeah. So that's something as simple as that, can bring in a lot of impact. I mean, during the COP27 as well, there were several talks and calls in terms of accelerating, adaptation. And what we're saying is we cannot just have it, over here. We need to channel it down and trickle it down to the local farmers so that people really understand the importance of the same. The question is then, what does that look for Kenya? Yes, we've addressed a little bit as far as the farmers are concerned, but it's not only the farmers, right, that we're talking about. So then channeling it to different communities and making them understand their role as far as adaptation is concerned. Where do we start from? What does that conversation look like for the different communities?
Thank you, Winnie. Discussions around COP, actually looking at what we're pushing for so much, is to identify and realize that we have special needs as Africa, and our circumstances are really different. So given that global conversations, we are pushing for increased ambitions on adaptation finance. Just like you have put it, really farmers need a lot of support for them even to adapt to the effects of climate change. That means that the aspect of technology needs to be taken care of. At the same time, they need to be financed for them really to do a wonderful work in their farms. So the aspect of adaptation finance, doubling it, and I think these are conversations that started in COP26 in Glasgow. But of course, we are registering some disappointments as we speak, because really,
is it some or a lot?
Yes, they're not very clear really on the metrics. Adaptation, just unlike mitigation, doesn't have clear metrics on how to measure progress. And that's why we are really championing for locally led actions, because mitigation you can measure. These are the number of trees that you have planted, and this is the amount of carbon you are actually reducing as a result of planting these trees. Adaptation measures are unique. They are specific to the people. So when you talk about having a global goal on adaptation, it has been difficult even really to come up with that global goal adaptation. So we are really championing for increased ambitions on adaptation finance, something that to me it's not
it's
really coming for. Yeah, it's still a tussle. And we believe there's some progress, of course, especially on having a finance facility for loss and damage and all that, but it's not enough. That is like a vehicle which has just started running. So we don't know on the way what will happen. So it has been pushed and back, and really seeing how we are going to champion for adaptation even at local level. I think the government needs to do much on planning for themselves rather than depending on the north countries.
Absolutely. So then what does that look like exactly? Because again, and it's the whole conversation about loss and damage. I know for the international community, some of them were like, fine, we know. We know what has happened. But at the same time, let's sort of like come to a compromise. Because Africa, yes, we are emitting less, but we're experiencing the most when it comes to the damage. But also, does it mean that then we just sit and wait for the global north to come and sort out these issues? What is it that, the continent in itself can do to sort of like set a stage for the global north to then come in?
I think for me, it's always important to remember that we act as a global community. And these are multilateral discussions that are ongoing. So as much as it might be good to say, well, as Africa, what are we doing? It's important that we're not the only ones playing our role. When it comes to emissions, we are definitely, as we all know, we are definitely not high contributors as Africa as a whole. So we actually do need that commitment, and I think we need the commitment to stay, because as Isaac just mentioned, in COP27, we saw some countries start trying to reduce or to push for reducing the proportion of climate finance going to adaptation. And that's not the direction we want to be moving in. I think there needs to be acceptance by everybody that local communities and locally led actions are important, in spite of the fact that, yes, it's difficult to measure, in spite of the fact that I think something else that we also need to accept is that adaptation might not necessarily lead to income or profitability, but I think that that's good, because we are talking about people's lives. And if we want to see progress and we want to see, a global community that's strong, then we need to make sure that we are putting local communities at the heart of that action. And so for me, I think it's very important to accept that adaptation will take more time. We'll need much more commitment from governments, even our government to channel our own internal financing into climate adaptation. But if we have that commitment on financing, we have that commitment on research and development, we have that commitment on technology, then we can create the change that we want to see in those local communities and reduce these impacts that we see all the time. Just now we're talking about drought and being asked to fundraise as Kenyans, but actually these are things that we could be addressing before they happen to enable communities to be agile when things like drought or flooding come up.
Yeah, don't just react.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Don't just react. And of course, when it comes to then the long-term measures, I think majority of the times we usually talk about it. This is not the first time that we're experiencing drought, for example, in the country. It has been here. We've made contributions, over and over again, but still we find ourselves in this place where we're also asking for more funds. So then how do we empower those communities as well, and the government to channel in the resources that you're saying, so that we don't just ask to say DNA, to say DNA. We can also do much more. The question on the government and releasing the funds is usually like a very big issue, but what are the priority areas, Isaac, that, for example, the government needs to, focus on, the private sector needs to focus on, the local community need to focus on, so that together we move towards the common goal and not everybody doing their own things just in the name of adaptation?
As I build into that, really on COP27, there were some key issues that came out. Close to 5 articles were addressing the issues of adaptation financing. And we need to recognize that Article 17 of the Paris Agreement is showing us the gap when it comes to adaptation financing of our local-led adaptations. But the decisions that we realized in COP27 fails to provide clear metrics on how that is going to be done. So it means there's still a hot air per se, and really we are going to take time really to achieve that, as Maimuna has put it. There was some emphasis on protecting water ecosystems, and I think that one was something to register, but again, it's not enough, because we are looking at the capacity of the local communities. These are the areas that we need to focus on. First, we build their capacity. We need to foster technology that can work for them, and again, build their resilience. Okay? So for you to achieve adaptation as a whole, you need to look at those 3 components: adaptive capacity, technology, and also the resilience of those local communities, so that it can be long-term. They can survive over a long period of time with the existing situation that they're living in. And I think that's where we're missing it, because we think that adaptation can be addressed even at national level. No. We need counties even to enact laws that are actually fostering actions for the local communities. We need to have funds even at the county level. Funds that are going to speak to the needs. Let them prioritize actions at the local level. If they are doing farming, which kind of farming are we supposed to tell them to do? Okay, some of them have stuck to maize, and maize are not doing so well. Maybe the alternative is millet or sorghum.
Or wheat,
okay, or wheat. So those are the actions that we should be speaking at, and the counties should be at a position even to fund. So it starts from the local level, moves to the national level, and then now we move further to the global level, and the discussions are going to take shape at that particular time.
Absolutely. So how about you take a break, and of course when we come back we'll still continue on the priority areas. I would also want to pick your brain on the same in terms of what are some of these priority areas, because if we just focus on adaptation like as a blanket, we might not achieve much. But before we go on a break, how about we put you up to speed with what is happening, especially today and tomorrow, and that is the YSK, the National Science and Technology Exhibition. Remember, this is the 5th exhibition that will be held actually today and tomorrow. That is 29th to 30th of November 2022 at the Site Expo Center in Westlands. And of course, the exhibition theme is using STEM to redefine our future. And of course, like we said, the exhibition will be piloting the first ever hybrid physical and virtual event that will involve students from 37 counties, including 4 special needs education schools. And again, over 400 students will showcase both virtually and physically 203 projects in 4 award areas: social, behavioral sciences, chemical, physical, and mathematical sciences, as well as biological and ecological sciences and technology. And 80 finalists projects from 71 schools will be exhibited at the Sarit Expo Center as students compete for the Young Scientist of the Year award amongst 22 other awards. And remember, it is open to the public, so find your way to Sarit Center. All right, take a break. We'll be back with more as far as adaptation is concerned. And is it a castle in the sky, or is it achievable reality? More to come. Stay with us. This is Your World.
His legs are huge as for
Santon, a fun new world of flavor. Fruity freshness in every sip.
The golden rules for a new beginning for a clear skin. Brought to you by Mentholatum Acnes. Acne C10 is the secret to an instant glow and spotless skin. Acne C10 is a 10% pure vitamin C serum that effectively fades dark spots, clears sunburns, and visibly reduces dark patches.
Acne C10, 10% pure vitamin C serum, safe on all skin types.
Young Scientist Kenya brings you the 5th National Science and Technology Exhibition on 29th to 30th November 2022 at the Sarit Expo Center in Westlands with the theme Using STEM to Redefine Our Future. Since 2018, YSK has reached over 200,000 students from all 47 counties through STEM mentorship and outreach program. Additionally, YSK's goal for inclusion and diversity through the Leave No Learner Behind program provides students with special needs, marginalized girls, and those in arid and semi-arid lands access to STEM learning equipment. To attend the exhibition, visit www.ysk.co.ke/2022 exhibition. Young Scientists Kenya, inspiring, informing, and empowering youth towards STEM.
They say it's in your nature. It's a woman thing. On the outside, it's a light that shines bright. Inside, it's a fire that burns with fight. It's having a dream and pursuing it, making a plan and working it. It's starting a business and owning it, big or small, local or global. We see you, your dream, your reason for being. This is at the core of what we do, raise women and build them for better. As a woman in business, let KCB fire up your female-led and made enterprise, KCB Flame. To find out more, WhatsApp 0711 087 087 or call 0711 087 000 and visit us at any KCB branch countrywide.
Dad, I was just meeting with the supplier earlier.
What for?
No, because once the new campaign kicks in, sales will double, so I had production doubled too.
And you didn't inform me about this?
Dad, I didn't want to bug you about trivial things.
If I call the supplier right now, would he also tell me the exact same thing?
Forever, my love.
Crystal Rivers Residences, the future of fine living.
You're watching Your World in association with Young Scientist Kenya.
Welcome back, glad you're still with us. The show is Your World, and of course today it's all about the climate adaptation. And the question that we're asking, is it a castle in the sky or is it an achievable reality? And of course we're looking at the different areas, you know, that adaptation again will contribute majorly as far as climate change is concerned, and what we can do as individuals, because like we said, it's very easy for us to say, yeah, the global north will take care of that, or the government will take care of that, but we don't take that initiative ourselves. First of all, to really understand adaptation, why is it important, and what we can do, you know, to participate in the same. But before we continue with the conversation, remember something that you might want to be part of, and especially for the parents, now that most of the learners are at home, maybe you might want to take them to Sarit Center, because there is the National Science and Technology Exhibition happening today and tomorrow. That is 29th and 30th, and of course the 5th edition, and the theme for the exhibition is using STEM to redefine our future. And of course, like we said, there will be like over 400 students who will be showcasing both virtually and physically, and of course 203 projects in 4 award areas that we talked about earlier on. And of course the 80 finalists projects from 71 schools will be exhibited as well at the same. So you might want to find yourself then, of course, among some of the key guests that are expected there is President William Ruto, amongst, you know, other dignitaries who'll be available there. But like we're saying, for the parents, you might want to take your children or go, you know, and see what will be happening at Sarit Center. Remember, it's today and tomorrow. But let's come back to a conversation, and the question that we're asking, is it a castle in the sky or is it an achievable reality? Maybe we might answer that before we end, you know, during the tail end of the conversation. But again, what we were talking about, Maimuna, earlier on, and that is the key priority areas that we need to focus on, because like we said, we can't just leave that to the government or to the global north. We can do something ourselves. We've talked about the farmers, yes, majorly, right? Yeah. But maybe someone in the city is watching and thinking, sawa, yun wow, ain't for me. Yeah. What is it that we can, in our own little ways, some of these contributions, but then again, looking at the bigger picture, and that is the priority areas?
Well, first of all, I think we focus on farmers a lot because of just how Kenya's economy is set up. Yeah. A lot of our GDP relies on agriculture. True. A lot of our communities themselves are, you know, smallholder farmers. And so that's why we focus on farmers. Mostly on the farmers, the other thing, of course, I think is that you can be a farmer in your own small way. We have kitchen gardens and ways of doing urban gardening, which can be, even if you don't have space, you can, you know, plant your few vegetables and herbs in a gunia even, and have that. But I think apart from that, as you said, of course, when you look at like urban settlements, I think of, for instance, people in urban informal settlements, and they have always issues of flooding. I think we always see anytime it rains, the worst impacted areas are all our informal settlements across Nairobi, but also in other towns. Other urban informal settlements are also affected by the rise in lake levels or sea levels. So it's not just about farmers, of course, it's also about these other communities, and how do we get that adaptation. And some of these things, I think, it's also sometimes not possible for the community to do everything around it, but there's ways in which urban informal settlements, I've seen communities be able to do things like have sandbags, so that even when there's flooding, at least it's not going into the house. Yes, and things like that. Of course, there's also things you can do at that very local community level, clearing drainage. It shouldn't be the responsibility of the community.
I mean, take care of the environment that you're in, right?
Yes, and then for coastal communities, I think there is also that element. When you're talking about the rising sea levels, there's a lot of shoreline erosion. This also changes how coastal communities need to interact with the environment. And I think, like Isaac said, it's kind of ridiculous to be doing the same thing and expecting things
different results.
Yes, different results. Or if you see things that are impacting the environment, to continue to do them. So you talked about the blue gum farmers before, the people who said, oh, we realize now it's affecting the water table and we stopped. But we know that not everybody has stopped. So we know there's people who are still planting these things which are going to impact them, their children. So there is actions that we can take, and it's
a simple,
and it's really at that very local level. What are things that you can do? You know, if you know that, for instance, every year around this time, flooding is going to occur, how can we start to preempt some of these things? It's not only the responsibility of the communities, and in some cases it shouldn't be, but that's the place in which we are now. But I think some of the things that we've also talked about when it comes to farmers, being open to planting different kinds of seeds, to be honest, to lean in some of the indigenous seeds and crops that we've always planted, and seeing how we can use those. Sometimes they can be more resilient, but maybe we stopped planting them because we changed to a cash crop.
Commercialization.
Exactly, commercialization. And commercialization is not bad, but it's also good to diversify. So if you have a farm of, you know, maybe 5 hectares, you don't have to plant one crop. And if the harvest fails because that crop is affected, you can see different ways to adapt. We used to learn in school
crop rotation.
Exactly,
so
yes.
Change
and have, more than one at the same. They also actually help in soil. They're symbiotic in nature, so having different plants during the same planting season is actually beneficial.
Absolutely. There's something that we can all do. So don't say, Mimi do Nairobi can do nothing. No, we all feel the impact of the same. And something else that is equally important is technology. And some of so then how do we harness technology to also help, you know, in adaptation, Isaac?
Thank you very much. Technology is very important, especially in the context of Kenya, because we have very many young people, and really harnessing the efforts of those young people to do something constructive as far as adaptation is concerned, it's something that we need to look at, okay? So the aspect of innovation and technology is something that the government really needs to put much effort on, really to build capacity of the youth and to ensure that they can embrace technology that can work. But in the context of UNFCCC climate change processes, we talk about technology transfer. But this is where we miss the target, because we want to transfer technology that might not work for Kenya. That's why everything has to be local. You know? Yes, we need to have, if it is technology transfer, let's accompany with it, first of all, capacity to use that technology, and also the finances which are required, because we are dealing with vulnerable people in this case. One, youth, they are unemployed. We have women who are actually suffering from a broad effect of climate change. We have the marginal communities, which for a long time has been suffering as a result of climate change, and the adaptive capacity has been very low. So we talk about technology, we should accompany it with capacity building, we should accompany it with finances to ensure that even that technology can be scaled out to the scale that can support the production of either food and all that. I want to give you an example with the local communities at...
I was about to ask, so then how do we localize technology to fit our needs?
One, agriculture is one thing that I think many youths have really shied away from. They think it's a dirty job. While we have youths who are actually doing so well with vertical gardening, just the installation of vertical gardening to the people, even in their homes, they just do the installation and they get income out of it. But there are those who are also practicing small-scale agriculture out of these vertical gardening technologies that we have, especially in the urban centers or in the, we call them the slums within Nairobi or Kisumu or areas like Mombasa. So there are those agricultural technologies that can work, and there are those that cannot work because we don't have the capacity to either finance those kind of technologies or the skills to ensure that they work in our context. So vertical gardening is one thing that has really worked. We have people who have actually used the small spaces that they have even to keep poultry, but not just keeping them at large scale, but putting those ones which can produce eggs, you know, for them to sell. And there are those who have also embraced greenhouses for production of vegetables, tomatoes. We have our groups within the city carton in Eastleigh who are actually doing so well in production of food, and they are finding themselves in the value chain of the agricultural value chain. So there are a lot of things that people can do, especially the youths, around technology, and it's really working for them.
And first majority of them are tech savvy. Question, is, let's say someone is watching us from Samburu, right? Or Garissa, or for example, Makueni, and thinking, Sawa, technology, maybe someone has never owned a phone, for example, smartphone, right? Where majority of the people will say, you can almost do anything with your smartphone, right? The farmers are encouraged as well to use, you know, the smart farming, you know, to sort of like help with the same, either predict, you know, the weather and all those things. So someone in these areas that are mostly affected by climate change have felt the highest impact of the same, are watching us this morning and thinking, okay, how? How do I do that?
I think that's great, and I think it's one of the things that we definitely have to think about. Not everybody has the same, like, even just the same understanding of how to use a smartphone. The advantage we actually have in Kenya is that we have a very high amount of the population with access to phones, not necessarily smartphones, but phones in general. So I think that one of the ways in which we can think about, if you're talking, let's say, about early warning systems, it's to make sure that, you know, these are not going to only people who can download a specific app and have, you know, money to buy bundles and make sure that they're online all the time. That's not practical. It's not going to actually reach those who need it most. That's true. But if we are using, for instance, USSD codes, and you see the advantage of that is they can be very localized. So as Isaac said, we don't have, not all interventions have to be from the national government. If county governments can come and say, we're going to set up an early warning system for our population, they have a bigger understanding of their population, they can be very specific on which areas might, let's say, if a rainy season is coming up in a very specific area and there's a space for people to plant or to harvest water, then they can send that alert early so that people are prepared. So it's just about getting to that local level. Some of the other interventions, of course, include using media, but maybe some of the media that also communities might use more, so community radio stations and radio stations just working at that local level. And in fact, one of the interesting things that I've seen is that, you know, a lot of times in some of these communities, it's women who are contributing to adaptation. But women most of the day are out because they're looking for water or they're looking for firewood. So they don't have time to listen to the radio stations during the day when some of this information might be going out. So how do we create an information sharing system that's actually responsive to the realities of local communities? And I think when we have, when you're very intentional and working at that local level, then you're really going to be able to create information systems, capacity development systems, you know, like if people are developing technologies. I think you can do it if you are very focused on that community level. Then the other thing that I want to talk about just in terms of our innovations and our technologies at local level, I do agree that technology transfer is not the fix that people think it is. Technologies work differently in different countries. Technologies might not be accepted, but I also know that Kenyans are really innovative. So we really need to have this environment that supports innovation, that supports creativity. So can we reduce the burden of bureaucracy and administrative processes for our youth who are developing these solutions? Could we have some kind of amnesty that they don't have to get, I don't know how many different licenses, get taxed before they're even creating revenue? How do we create an environment that actually encourages these innovations? Because I believe that Kenya, we have that capacity.
100%.
We just need the enabling environment for it.
Absolutely. So it's more of like the policies and you know, all the things, just to give them that.
The policy and regulatory environment. It just needs to be there to be supporting. And as much as taxation and revenue is important, I think when you're talking about really youth, we're talking about adaptation, we need to decide what the priority is. And it's that we could wait until somebody is very established. We could have, you know, concessions for youth under a certain age, so that somebody is not doing their first business and then being expected to pay tax already. We could have subsidies. We could have, at the county level, you know, even like innovation drives, spaces where actually people are encouraged to develop this and given the resources, and resources is not just financial. It's things like time, it's things like space, materials. How do we create that environment?
You know, exactly. So that they can participate in this. And of course, it will be really interesting, especially to hear from the people, and especially the young people. Majority of them will come and tell you, listen, I have this, I have that. You know, and yesterday we were also looking at some of the, you know, innovation that this group of, 2 young girls, 17 engineers from Samburu have come up with like a water purification, you know,
Yeah.
gadget or equipment, if I can call it. It was very interesting to see that. So there's the will is there, but then again, sometimes the resources and mentorship might lack in the same. And also something else, you know, that is clean cooking. We usually talk about it, but still, unfortunately, see, you know, communities are still do the same. Majority will say alternatives are not there, or if they're there, they are expensive. You know, we can't afford it. So then, how do we make it easier, you know, for people to get to this new approach, and that is as far as clean cooking is concerned, Isaac?
Well, I want to give you a typical example of what's happening. Really, in Kisumu, there is a group that we work with of women, actually the widows, who came together to enlarge in the adaptation agenda.
Okay.
And their key problem was on the wastes, a lot of waste in their local areas, you know.
Right.
Now, we were wondering, how can we go about empowering these women and at the same time providing a solution to them for the waste menace that they had? We trained them on some options that are there.
Okay.
Then now left them to come up with what they think can work for them. It's amazing that as we speak, these women are making briquettes out of the wastes that they have.
All right.
And actually what they are grappling with as we speak is the issue of demand is too high for them really to, yes. So really there are solutions, there are solutions and there are alternatives to what we do daily, maybe what is not so productive. These women are actually compacting these wastes and using porridge from cassava to produce compacted briquettes, which can burn for a long period of time and as well not produce the smoke that, you know, recently you see in the media. The aspect of indoor air pollution is actually affecting women on large scale.
That's true.
Yeah, so there are alternatives. There are alternatives really to the solutions that we have as far as adaptation is concerned.
All right.
And I believe that what we need is to ignite the potential within our women, within our youths, within our marginal communities to come up with their own alternatives. Really, we don't need to define for them what they want. The solutions are at the ground. Let them come up with initiatives that are going to fit them well. Yes. And then, for our youths, let me tell you, for example, there is an issue of Uber. You know, you take an Uber and you move to a place. There is a youth actually who came up with an app to collect waste. You know, you simply go to your phone, click, and then it will show where you are. They come pick the waste, and you just pay them small amount of fee. You know, with that they are actually generating income. At the same time, they are adapting to the vulnerable situations that they are in.
Yes. So the solutions are there, but then again, so scaling that into, you know, like something bigger can be of benefit, and especially maybe to the entire committee. And in those areas where they say we can't afford this, we can't afford that, but you know, sort of like upscale that into. We literally have around 5 minutes to go. There's so much that we need to talk about it. Of course, my whole aspect is fine. So the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda was set. There has been calls for accelerated efforts on the same. We've talked about the priority areas that need to be looked into, just so that we move in the right direction. And of course, we know COP28 will be happening next year. The conversations that we will be looking forward to hear. One of the things is the adaptation, and of course where we are at. You said it will be difficult. Can be somehow difficult to measure that, but we can see the progress and see where we're heading and what we're lacking. So the whole aspect of raising these funds, the climate adaptation funds, and making sure that the funds are channeled in the right direction, the correct people, getting the finances. What is it that needs to change? Because we have talked about this over and over again, but still the issue is there.
I would say for me, what I really think needs to change is the political will towards adaptation.
All right.
So when you have political will on something, then that's when action follows. And I think we are not yet seeing that commitment when we go to COPs. We are seeing the drive, we're seeing the push, especially from youth, from civil society, from some governments. But ultimately, this is a game where people are juggling priorities, and as long as the priority is not adaptation, the financing won't follow.
Sure.
There were commitments made that we know have not been stuck to.
Up until today,
in fact, now we have countries trying to push back on the commitments that were made. So you really see that the political will to make adaptation a reality, well-financed, really reaching local communities, it's not yet there. And for me, I think that's where solidarity needs to come in among, you know, of course, like African countries, but also other countries where adaptation finance is critical. We need to make sure that it's our priority so that nobody is swaying us with their own priorities. I think for me, when we put local communities at the center of climate action, then we will see that political will that we need. And that's what we really need to see. That's the change that needs to happen. That it's local communities that need the support.
The support that, that's you know, desperately needed, especially when it comes to adaptation.
Yes.
All right, Isaac?
Yes.
What do you feel, Steve?
Before COP, our call was very clear that we needed a grant-based facilities that would ensure that we implement adaptation to the limits we expect. But unfortunately, doubling of the adaptation funds never made it to the agenda, or no, it was never discussed so much on COP27. And I think, as I said before, we need to find alternatives. It's high time we localize this. It's high time we localize this. As we push for finances at global level, I think the government, the county governments need to prioritize climate finance. Okay, we need to set aside finances that can address our needs. Even as we push at that, we know we are not emitting much, but again, we are dying. People are dying as a result of climate change. Are we going to wait for longer period for more people to die? You know, we need to have local actions. We need to have local policies that are going to ensure that we adapt to climate change. And I think all actors are supposed to come together, private sectors, civil society organizations, NGOs, you know, and the government. We need to combine efforts so that we can raise finances at local level. And I'm very happy Africa is moving towards that direction. We actually set aside an initiative that will ensure that we raise funds really to address the issues of Africa as far as adaptation is concerned.
All right. So then who's holding all these actors accountable? Very quickly before we end the conversation. And what more do they need to do? Sort of like to strengthen and the push just to see this happen so that it's not just all talk and no action.
I think it's very important that local communities, sometimes we tend to talk about local communities in a very paternalistic way, you know, oh, we need to, you need to be taken care of, you need capacity. But local communities have champions and have leaders who can be in these spaces pushing for, they understand the reality better than anybody else ever can. So it's also about how do we get local communities, how do we get youth, how do we get just individuals that are affected by climate change, not only working in their communities, but talking at this, you know, in the county government discussions at national level and at events, you know, global conferences like COP and others, like the Climate Adaptation Summit. I think for me, when we see that representation and understand that it's not something we are doing for local communities, but something that we should all be working to ensure that local communities have that ability to do themselves, then I think that's when we'll start moving in the right direction. All right.
And Isaac, again, as we close and sort of like a yes or no, I think both of you, Castle in the sky or achievable reality? What would you say?
It's achievable reality.
It's achievable reality.
It's achievable reality, but with some caveats. Maybe next time we talk about more.
I sort of like had like the buzz in your
but
statement.
It's achievable.
It really is. It really is. If the will is there and the push, you know, we put it in the work. Let's just talk about it. All right. Thank you very much to both of you for coming. Time is never enough when we're having such conversations, but. That does not mean that we'll not continue with this theme. We'll still continue, you know, talking about the same, because again, this is something that affects, you know, all of us. Maybe some more as compared to the others, but we're all affected. So thank you for coming by today. Maimuna Kabatesi, Global Program Manager, HEVOS, as well as Isaac Oindo, Program Officer, Gender and Climate, YWCA. Thank you very much, really, for coming by to both of you. And thank you for staying with us until the end of the conversation. I know you have picked a thing or two, because like we said, we cannot just sit and say, yeah, that's not our issue. I mean, yes, our floods here, weather has changed, the drought is here, but that is someone else's issue. This is our issue. So let's put in the work, all of us, just to make sure that that climate adaptation is actually achievable. But before we say goodbye, remember the 2022 National Science and Technology Exhibition is happening. Just in case you're tuning in right now, it will be happening or is happening at the Sarit Expo Center in Westlands today and tomorrow, 29th to 30th. And of course, the theme is using STEM to redefine our future, and the exhibition will be piloting, the first ever hybrid physical and virtual event that will involve students from 37 counties, including 4 special needs education schools. And like we said, over 400 students will showcase both virtually and physically 203 projects in 4 award areas, that is social and behavioral sciences, chemical, physical and mathematical sciences, biological and ecological sciences, and technology. And over 80 finalist projects from 71 schools will be exhibited at the Sarit Center, Sarit Expo Center. So you want to get yourself there. If you're a parent, you can go, or bring your child and see what young people are doing over there as far as exhibitions are concerned. So we have to put a stop here. My name is Vinay Lubembe. Have yourselves a lovely day ahead. I'll see you tomorrow morning, same time, same place, right here on Your World. But until then, stay safe, and remember, we all have work to do as far as climate change and climate adaptation is concerned. So do your part. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.